Hello, I'm Paul Yeager, and this is the M2M podcast, a weekly production of the Market to Market TV show and Iowa PBS. This week, we talk to a graduating high school senior who's had his life change just a little bit. Yes, he doesn't get to walk across the stage and get the diploma, at least not yet. There's still a possibility that could happen either virtually or in person. We'll talk about that. But the big thing is he doesn't get to go to Washington, D.C. as part of the U.S. Presidential Scholar. He is a winner, one of only a few in the country. And we'll talk with Blake Van Der Kamp. And he is from Prairie City Monroe High School in Iowa, east of Des Moines in Jasper County. We'll find out what it means to be that scholar, what his teacher has meant to him, and the inspiration that she has provided to him along his journey as he gets ready for the next chapter, which is to be a Voc Ag teacher. He's really excited, and I think he'd be really good in the classroom. We'll find out what is keeping Blake busy these days and what he's looking forward to, and even find out what he thinks his classroom might look like. That is today's discussion on the M2M podcast. Well, first off, Blake, I want to say thank you for joining us, and I do want to know, why did you apply to be a U.S. presidential scholar?
So the process for the presidential scholar was actually, you can't even apply for it. You have to actually be invited. And it was my advisor who was the unique person that decided to nominate me. And for career technical education area, they take all the ag teachers, all the FCS teachers, and all the career technical education areas. And all these teachers submit all these great kids that they think of. And our state, as well as others, they only select 5 candidates from the state level, and then they submit them on to the national level. And I still to this day have no idea what she wrote, but it must have been something pretty good to make it this far.
So let's give your advisor her due. Tell us who she is and what she means to you.
So my advisor is Mrs. Amber Sampson. Without a doubt, she is the number one person that's had an effect on my life. From the fact of teaching me about agriculture and giving me a passion for it, but also doing all these amazing things. And I mean, anyone that's ever been an FFA or anything knows about ag, you know that advisors, their parents, their friends, their community members, they all do all these roles, and it's just amazing things that they do every single day. And I think all of us are better for having them in our lives.
And did she tell you that she was submitting your name forward for this?
She kind of hinted around the fact, but I didn't actually know officially until I believe it was the first or second day, the last day before break, when we were going back to school for the spring semester. And I got this letter in the mail. And for some reason it said the Department of Education on it. I was really confused, and I looked it up, and sure enough, it was the presidential scholar nomination.
And here you're like, well, Department of Ed, I'm not a teacher yet. Why are they contacting me, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So what does being a U.S. presidential scholar mean?
So normally in any given year, the students would all be sent to Washington, D.C. this June, where we would get to meet with Donald Trump, the current president, and then we would be awarded medallions, and we become part of this great organization where they connect you with world leaders, which are government officials, ranging from lawyers, ranging to agriculturalists, just this wide range of amazing people. And it's lifetime experiences that you'll never get anywhere else, and connections. And unfortunately for this year, it's just online that we're doing it, but it's still an amazing opportunity to make it this far and to still be forever known as a U.S. presidential scholar.
So there are 5 in Iowa, is that right? Or 3?
That was the selection process.
Okay.
From when they sent, but they're actually only got chosen 20 career technical education out of the entire nation.
All right. So you're one of 20 in the country. Do you know how
Yep.
many would have been at that ceremony had you been able to go to DC?
There would have been 161 of us, 20 being career technical education, 15 or 20 being the arts, and then all the rest are just from various places throughout the United States and through our territories.
So tell me exactly what CTE means and career technical education to kind of help me out. I'm not in the education field as much.
So career technical education is more of our hands-on classes and the Department of Education. So it would be anything from your industrial technology to agriculture or business classes. And the really strong centralized goal of those areas is more if you aren't thinking of college, or even if you are thinking of college, to provide a more hands-on role. And through, I guess, the Presidential Scholars Program, all of us that were chosen out of the 20 candidates, we had exemplary skills in those areas, and have really done things to promote career technical education in our own communities and towns.
What has drawn you to that field?
I believe wholeheartedly it's the dedication. I remember coming in that I would say there's almost a stereotype that kids or people going into career technical education or even vocational schools, they don't have everything else that everyone else does. But you, especially being involved in career technical education this past 4 years, I've really realized that they work just as hard as everyone else, and if not, sometimes 10 times harder. And it's really cool to see all these different things that people do, going to be a farmer or be a welder or go straight into business, start their own business without going into a college, and it's saving them money. It's doing all these cool things for them, and it's the path that works for them. And I think that's all that matters, is whatever they do to be successful.
Don't worry, the wind gets going sometimes and my doors open and shut. That's kind of fun. Hold on. That's the home studio life for you, Blake. We're supposed to, yeah, I just look out the window and it is kind of gusty. So what are your plans here? If everything, we can all go back to regular education. What's the plan here in the fall?
So this fall, I am attending Iowa State University, majoring in agriculture education with a possible double major, which is to be determined. And I'm hopefully going to either graduate in the next 4 years with my bachelor's, or even probably accelerate it to my master's with just how many credits I've had through high school.
And your high school is Prairie City, Monroe, Jasper County, the Mustangs. You also didn't get to participate in some of those other activities that would come as being a senior, including walking across the stage, right? Or what did they do virtually to help get you that degree?
So as of right now, we are still trying to figure out our graduation, but it sounds like right now we're leaning a little bit more virtual. And it's definitely been a hard thing for a lot of us seniors to swallow. But at the same point, I think the only thing that's kind of positive in this situation is hoping that if we have to do all these things, that hopefully no one else will have to do them this next year.
Right. It is a little bit of a sacrifice for future generations. I see what you're saying. I've been talking to uh, girls in Iowa that have been part of soccer and they didn't get to have their state tournament or any of their season period. Do you feel like you missed out on some of those final things that seniors get to do in high school?
I definitely feel like I've missed out on a little bit, but I think one thing that's been just prominent in my head is the fact that it's not so much those moments or like what I was doing that I appreciated. It's the fact of just being surrounded by people. And I think the hardest thing for almost all of us is the fact that our last day was the day before spring break and none of us knew. And I remember exactly what I was doing. I was at the elementary playing with kids for National Honor Society. And it's just crazy to imagine that that was your last day of high school ever.
You just never know when today might be it.
Definitely.
You said National Honor Society, working there with the elementary kids. What are other activities that you've been involved in, Blake?
So throughout high school, I've been involved in a lot. I've been involved in our school CTE advisory council, choir, vocal jazz, show choir. I did track and cross country my freshman year, and then I've been involved in all of our theater from speech to just school plays as well.
Do you ever breathe and have time to yourself?
I've definitely had to realize to take a little bit and relax throughout, especially this COVID period where I just kind of sit and think, wow, I really have some free time now.
Yeah, a little bit. Kind of puts things where you're like, what are these walls of my home? I didn't know that they were this color. Have you taken up any activities at home during this time?
I've done a little bit. Me and my friends actually decided to start college this summer, so we're getting a head start. So we started that this past week. And besides that, I spent a lot of time just trying to get ready for college and spend some time just like relaxing, watching TV, and just enjoying time while I have it.
Have you been to Washington, D.C. before?
Yes, I've been twice. I went once with my school, and then the other time I went for the Washington Leadership Conference for FFA.
So, what do you know then, knowing the city? What were you supposed to get to do? Things you were going to get to see? Where was the ceremony going to be?
I know that there was a lot of sightseeing involved, but I think the number one highlight that unfortunately none of us will get to experience, to my knowledge, is we actually have been able to go in the White House, which is something I've always wanted to do.
And either a ceremony inside one of the rooms or maybe an outside ceremony. I'm sure nobody knew what that was going to be. It depends on lots of
Mhm.
factors, right? What's your favorite thing to see in DC?
I think it's just all the monuments and the historical context behind all of them, just knowing that all the every single thing that's there has a story behind it. And I've always been just a giant person that loves to hear about history and everything. So it's just great to see that in a visual representation.
Did you do any of the monument? I mean, when you said you went with those different groups, I mean, so you're with groups, and were there some that you wanted to stay at a little longer than others, and some you were like, yeah, I've seen enough?
Definitely.
Which ones?
I would say probably the Martin Luther King Junior Memorial, and then as well as Arlington Cemetery. I think anyone that's ever been to Arlington, you could probably spend decades in just standing there and just taking it all in.
There is a lot to take in. The monument tour, my recommendation to anybody who hasn't gone to the city is to take a night tour where they will take you from place to place, and it's in the evening. And some you get to see the sun going down on some of them, and some of them are just extremely powerful at night. And I got to think, for me, the Vietnam War Memorial at night is just a whole nother layer to that. And then the Korean monument, have you seen that one where they're coming out of the bushes? That one
Mhm.
at night, too, if you get a foggy night, is also extra eerie. So, all sorts of good places. Hopefully, you get to do a little bit more. So, this virtual ceremony, it won't be the same, but it still will have a little bit of closure. Will that be your last official high school event or event as a high schooler, you think?
I believe so, and I guess I don't know if that's going to be the closure we're all looking for, but I guess it's the closure that we get in this scenario.
Yeah, and then depending on whatever happens with PCM and what they decide to do with your virtual or in-person graduation, going to Iowa State to study being an ag teacher, and Ms. Sampson is someone who's involved in the Iowa Ag Teachers Association, and that's a whole nother group. Have you been around other ag teachers to know you're kind of looking forward to being in part of that fraternity?
Um, Definitely. For whatever reason, this year I got on a big kick about doing job shadows, and I think to date I've done job shadows with at least 17 agriculture educators throughout the state. So I've got to see a diverse group of educators with different passions, different areas that they like to teach about, and I've also been involved in DMAX Teachers Academy as well.
17 different schools. So where were some of them? And what did you kind of glean from that experience?
So most of them have been through the South Central FFA district in Iowa, ranging from as far as Leon, Central Decatur, and areas like North Polk and Ballard, or excuse me, not North Polk, but just Ballard. And from just doing all of that, it's very interesting. I've seen that no matter really what background you come from, you can still teach about animal science if that's your passion, or you can be a not one specialized area, but just kind of a jack of all trades. And it's just very cool to see all these unique bonds that all these teachers form with their kids, and all the unique things that they are doing to make them successful as a chapter.
Have you been taking notes of like, oh, I like what they do, and oh, I like what they do? Have you been kind of making just mental notes, or you been actually putting it into a notebook?
I typically do, or I try and limit myself to 2 pages because I could probably write a full-time essay about every single one of those places that I visit.
You could. So, what are some things you've picked up at other programs? And then did you bring those back to Mrs. Sampson and say, hey, why don't we do this? This is what they're doing over at this school.
There's definitely been a lot of cool things I've seen. One is that just room management. I think, especially in the career technical education area, it's hard to get budget or funding for a lot of these programs. And one thing that they've all really done is they've tried to make the best of their situation, whether it's having all these moving parts, whether it be tables that easily fold up and down, or it's chairs that are on rolling wheels. And it's just an amazing thing that to have almost a state or this room, but it can become anything they need it to be, and it can become a lab in 5 seconds. Or for example, the Des Moines FFA, where they have a much larger budget, it's very cool to see them where they're actually doing a grocery store inside of their school. And it's just something I couldn't even imagine having a grocery store in my own school.
And it also exposes that the urban districts and the rural districts and the suburban districts all kind of treat it differently and match whichever community. So it kind of depends on which community you would end up with your classroom.
Definitely.
The Southeast Polk is one that anybody who comes to the Iowa State Fair, they see what that program does, and that's work the Animal Learning Center as the baby animals are born, and they kind of maintain that. Had you had any experience or seen any of the work that they have done?
Yes. Last in 2019, I was an Iowa State Fair usher, so a lot of the ushers also get to experience and work that area. And I unfortunately didn't get to work that year, but I still had a lot of friends that did, and it's a very unique experience. And this year, I just kind of kept tabs on what they've been doing, and I didn't realize how much effort they put into it and how far in advance they planned for that. And it's just this cool thing to see this development of an idea that it's planned by all these kids, and then see them carry it out to the Iowa State Fair, and the passion that they have and the care for the animals too. It's unique to anything else I've ever seen.
And they got to time up all that gestation properly so it all
Yeah.
staggers out throughout the fair. If that's not good planning, you have the blue FFA coat over your right shoulder there, hanging proudly in your room. What's the blue coat mean to you?
100%. It's the memories, the passion, the dedication. The I think for nearly everyone that wears the blue jacket, regardless how far you went with it, if it was just you only wore it in the chapter in the ag room, or you wore it all the way to national convention for things, it takes you unbelievable places. It does unbelievable things for you. And luckily for me, I actually have two. That was my freshman year jacket. I outgrew, so I'm hoping my time in the jacket isn't done yet, but it does a lot for people. And I honestly couldn't even describe where I'd be without that jacket today.
And a little full disclosure here, you live in town, mom and dad in different spots of town, but so you're not even on the farm. So how does that how do you explain that to someone at convention? Because you know that when you go to a convention, I don't know what the percentage would be, but there's a whole bunch of kids that have not been on a farm, and here you come in, even in a rural district. And I'm not saying that your knowledge is above them, but do you look at agriculture differently from your perspective with knowing what I just set up?
I would say I definitely do, but I think the one unique thing that I've always enjoyed about coming from outside into agriculture is that I had no reason to be here. And coming from the outside perspective looking in, I've seen all these misconceptions, and I understand where consumers often are coming from. And I think it makes it easier to relate with them and tell them that this is what agriculture is. I've been on the outside. I know that sometimes, especially when it comes to labeling or price things or price related things, we often jump the gun and always blame the farmers or all these other things. But there's so much complexity to the situation, and it's been so easy. It's made it so much more of a unique relationship to relate with all people, especially when I'm just out in the community talking about FFA and what we're doing in agriculture. And I also think it's unique just to show that agriculture doesn't have to be related based on your area, if you're urban or rural, but just the fact that we're all just passionate individuals and we all care about agriculture.
What does agriculture mean to you?
I think agriculture is just more of a way of life. It's everything from what we wear on our backs to the fact of what we're eating at that very moment. And I think that it's just something in mind that we have to remember, that just be appreciative, because I mean, honestly, just looking at my room, every single thing in here somehow is connected to agriculture. It's just this wide range of things that you don't keep in mind of how much it affects you every single day.
One of the things that we like to say on Market to Market is we cover the food as it goes from farm gate to your plate. You have a job, and I've seen you at your job, one of your jobs, at a very popular restaurant in your hometown, Goldie's, and that's the end goal of where food goes. Has that helped and put any perspective on the understanding of food and how it's prepared and how it gets to the freezer and before it gets to the plate?
I would definitely say that's had an impact. I think that, um, especially being involved with that, and then at the same time through FFA, I was involved in the food science and technology career development event. And between those two, it really gave me an understanding of the process of starting off at the farm and then coming all the way to that point, and gives you the appreciation, but also understands of how to be efficient and not wasteful, and all these ideas of sustainability that we kind of think about in modern day times.
Well, you talk about the grocery store in the Des Moines classes. Do you think you'll encourage some of your students to have that experience of the end food, the food service type side?
I definitely want to emphasize that. And I think the best part that I loved about that grocery store that the Des Moines FFA was even doing is it was their animals that they raised, and then they sent it to a locker. Then they were selling those animals that they raised, and it was the plants that they grew, everything that was in house. And the fact to teach them that process of appreciation and of the just everything that has every single step that you have to go, and those just all the skills that you get through, it's just a once in a lifetime experience. And to provide that to even just one kid, I would do it in a heartbeat.
One of the things during this pandemic has emphasized to many people that they are very curious now where their food comes from. They know it just doesn't show up on a plate. They're like, wait a minute, where that comes from somewhere else. Your boss at Goldie's was one of the first, not one of the first, but he was somebody who early sourced his meat locally from meat at a locker he knew. It wasn't just he relied on a distributor. Have you ever had a conversation with him about that or how that kind of played out and maybe use that, translate that into a classroom or a learning experience?
I have not really had a sit down conversation with Brad about that, but I know that a lot of it has played into just who he is as an individual. And I know that Brad really values that local aspect and supporting, especially being involved in the Prairie City Business Association and involved in the Colfax Council. And I think it's just an appreciation that I want to teach all my students, in the fact that no matter where you go in life, and if you do all these amazing things, which I hope that you do, never forget where you come from. And that's kind of an aspect that I just try and live by, is the fact that no matter whatever I go back and do in life, remember that at one point I was that little kid kind of looking up to all those people, and remember to care for them and to still think about them every day.
Don't forget your roots. Don't forget where you came from.
Definitely.
That sounds like a country song. Definitely a song that you would write or have something. So Blake, I guess I'll wrap this up here. Ideally, what's the perfect classroom going to look like for you?
I believe the ideal classroom for me is probably something leaning a little bit more urban, just because I feel like I have a deep tie to those kids, and taking those kids that I see something in myself in them and telling them that, hey, I was in your shoes, and steering them towards agriculture. And then I think eventually just seeing them all do these amazing things in life and making impacts in agriculture and in other areas besides agriculture as well. And just supporting them throughout all their future endeavors.
Well, we wish you the best in your future endeavors, Blake. Thank you so much for the time. Congratulations on being one of 20 in the country for the CTE track as a U.S. presidential scholar. He is a graduate of Prairie City Monroe High School in Jasper County, Iowa. Blake, thank you so very much for the time.
Thank you very much.
A little secret, this came to us via an email to markettomarket@iowapbs.org. If you have an idea, send it there, and maybe it'll end up in a story. Thank you so very much for watching or listening. I'm Paul Yeager. Have a good one.